Hi there, students! I'm XS. That's little x, little s, which stands for extra sweet, because that's what I am. I'm a Puppy-sensei, and I make Japanese content to help you level up your abilities. Welcome to another grammar drop video. Today, I'm going to teach you all about this little guy. This is kekka. Kekka means something like the results of. So, yeah, I think a good way to translate this is as a result. For today, let's actually begin right away with the rules of usage for this concept. You're most often going to see kekka in cases where it follows one of the following three basic formats. So the first one would be a verb in the plain past plus kekka, and that means as a result of some action having happened. You're going to use this in cases where some verb has happened and it has obviously caused some direct result. However, you can also find kekka in situations where no action is specified, as in noun plus the particle no plus kekka. This is like as a result of something or because of some direct action or cause or direct force. Now, you're going to use this in cases where the cause of some result is based purely on the existence of a specified noun. I'm going to explain that more in a little bit, but generally speaking, the noun no kekka format really just creates a larger noun, meaning the results of X, right? And that should make sense for us, right? So noun no kekka, the result of that noun. Finally, you can also simply see kekka in the phrase sono kekka, as a result of this. We're going to see this used in cases where there was a previous sentence that has already introduced the reason that something has happened, or the reason that something is the way that it is. And then the second sentence is going to include sono kekka to say, based on that previous sentence, this next sentence follows, right? Okay, so let's look at an example of each one of these use cases. We're actually going to start with sono kekka because, in my opinion, this can actually be the most confusing one for new learners. All right, so here's an example sentence. 2年前、日本へ行きました。その結果、お寿司についてたくさん知ります。I actually don't like this sentence very much from a semantic level. It's perfectly grammatical and there's no real problem with it or anything like that. It's just I find the link between these two thoughts to be very tenuous. Why would just traveling to Japan mean that you know a lot about sushi? Like, it doesn't explain that you ate a lot of sushi or that you studied sushi or that you met a sushi chef or anything like that. I don't know. But I wrote this sentence, so if it's anyone's fault, it's mine. But, you know. Anyway, the point to understand here is that something is set up in the first sentence, and our second sentence pays off what was already set up in the first sentence by explaining that something happens as a result of that thing being true. From that level, this grammar pattern is actually pretty easy to use, right? I think it makes a lot of sense. And in the case of sono kekka, at least when used this way, it ends up being really always at the front of your sentence. And again, from that respect, it's moderately easy to use. You just always kind of stick sono kekka at the beginning of your sentence, no particle required, and then you just explain what happened as a result of that first sentence. One thing is true, as a result, sono kekka, something else happened or something else is true. However, as I alluded to before, sono kekka can also be used as a simple noun, which slightly complicates this. So let's look at another use case with sono kekka being used as a simple noun as a comparison to the previous sentence. Here's our new sentence. その結果をあまりよくわかりません. Okay, so here we can see in this sentence that sono kekka is being used slightly differently, and I've translated as I don't understand the results. I don't understand these results. I don't understand those results. Something like that. It's almost as if I could hold up a piece of paper and say, here are the results. I don't understand them. Since here sono kekka is a noun and it's being modified by the object marking particle o, And for that reason, we can tell that in this case, we're actually discussing our inability to really understand some kind of result, whether that's a physical result like a piece of paper or a graph, or just our figurative understanding of that result, right? So maybe that's the result of a study, or it doesn't really matter. We have those results and we don't understand them very well. We're not using sono kekka here to answer a question about the result of some previously established fact or action in the sentence that came before, right? And I think that that's a relatively minor complication when trying to parse out sono kekka in a sentence, whether that's the beginning of your sentence that says, oh, this thing is true, sono kekka, this other thing is true. But here, it's being used as a noun, right? So I don't understand these results. That's our noun phrase. So I definitely think that this is something to keep in mind, and we're going to talk about this more later as well. I just want you to be careful and consider, is there a particle that's being used to mark sono kekka? If there's no particle, it's probably being used in that way that explains the results of something that's been previously established. But if a particle does follow it, then you're probably talking about some specific results as a noun, right? I think that makes sense. All right, so now let's look at a case where kekka is following a verb. There's a lot of kanji here, right? So let's read this sentence. Kessa means morning. Undo suru would be a verb meaning to work out or to do exercise, which is fine. And in the casual past tense, that's going to be undo shita, right? It conjugates to shita. Ne? Suru becomes shita. Undo shita, I worked out. Now, undo shita is in the casual past so that it can take kekka, and it forms this entire phrase, undo shita kekka. Ne? You may be wondering why kekka always follows the casual past tense form of a verb. Remember, generally speaking, the register of a Japanese sentence, register means whether that sentence is casual or polite, that is almost always going to come at the end of a sentence and not in the middle. But a verb in the middle can be past tense if it does some work within the sentence. This verb, in this case, needs to be in the past tense because kekka generally means that something occurs because of the results of something that's already happened, right? Based on the results of my working out. So I worked out in the past, right? It doesn't make sense to say based on the results of me working out later. Maybe it does, but that feels like a whole lot of conjecture for this sentence to kind of do. But anyway, in almost all cases, that kekka is going to be following the result of something that has happened in the past, and therefore it needs to be a plain past verb. And like I said, it's plain because the whether it's casual or polite comes at the end of the sentence, not in the middle. So yeah, this whole sentence together, right? It's going to mean something like, my muscles are sore from my workout this morning, right? So, 今朝運動した結果、筋肉が痛いんだよ. My muscles hurt because I worked out this morning. Something like that. And that 痛いんだよ is a pretty informal but very emphatic way to say my muscles hurt, right? Okay. I feel like from that perspective, I think kekka is actually pretty easy to understand, right? Some past tense casual verb sets up the payoff, and then whatever follows, kekka is the immediate aftermath of whatever that verb has set up, right? I think that makes sense. So based on what we've been saying so far, what happens when the thing before kekka is a noun? Again, I think that's a little bit more complicated, so let's spend some time talking about it. Adding no kekka to a noun kind of can create a larger noun that can either mean the specific results of something or the results due to something. So here's an example of this complex noun phrase that's created with noun plus no plus kekka. 勝負の結果は残念でした. That means the result of the match was disappointing, right? Shobu is this word meaning like a match, right? And shobu no kekka would mean the results of that match. And that's something that we can kind of point to, right? We could point to like the score on a scoreboard. That's the result. The results of this match are this person got 10 points and this person got 35 points. And maybe we were hoping that the person who only got 10 points was going to be the winner. And as a result, それは残念でした. I'm disappointed in the results of the match. We can see here that we're using this 勝負の結果 as a whole noun phrase, right? I think I keep saying this, but I think that makes sense. And this is in line with what we've studied so far today, and we see the same pattern emerging in other uses of kekka that follow this same noun plus no plus kekka format, just like in this sentence, right? 調査の結果からたくさん習いました。ね? It makes good sense. Yeah, it's the results of the investigation, and based on the results of the investigation, we learned a lot. Yeah? So from the results of the investigation, we learned a lot. So everything that we already know about the use of kekka tells us that 調査の結果 is a complex noun that we've created, meaning the results of the investigation. That makes perfect sense. So I think it's easy to translate this sentence as, we learned a lot from the results of the investigation, where the results of the investigation is a long noun phrase. But there's a teeny tiny difference in nuance that I want to point out in another case. So let's continue to look at this sentence, right? But we're also going to look at this other sentence. So we've got 共同の結果からたくさん習いました looks exactly the same as the previous sentence, doesn't it? The only thing that we've changed is we've changed 調査 to 共同. And yet, I've translated them differently. Again, I think that this is a very extremely small nuance. But if you look at this second sentence, 共同の結果からたくさん習いました the nuance here is that while we definitely could translate 共同の結果 as a noun phrase, like the results of our collaboration, I think we can also treat kekka here as doing the kind of work that we saw in sentences like 運動した結果、筋肉が痛い. That is to say that we can also interpret 共同の結果 as I learned a lot as a result of our collaboration. Sure, technically that's kind of the same thing as the noun, the results of our collaboration, but I think it's important to think about how we translate these things, because for me, as a translator, when I look at this sentence, I'm thinking about more than just the simple way that we deal with this at the grammatical level, right? I want to think about semantics too. So for me, really, the most ideal translation of 調査の結果からたくさん習いました that's that first sentence, would be, we learned a lot from the results of the investigation, where the results of the investigation is a long noun phrase, just like I said before. But, to my mind, honestly, the best translation of 強度の結果からたくさん習いました our second sentence, would really be, I've learned a lot as a result of our collaboration. There's no distinction in the grammar. These look grammatically the same. The only real difference here is that choice of noun, so why treat them differently? Well, basically, again, and this is just my opinion, but I think that we treat them differently because as a translator, you really have to take into account all the possible and very small meanings that can be implied at the semantic level, right? So basically, I look at 調査の結果 as something that I could possibly point to, some data, right? 調査 means investigation. The results of the investigation could be like a graph, and I could hold up that graph and say, these are the investigation results. I can show them to you, I can hand them to you, we can look at them. But I think it's a little bit harder to do that with kyodo no kekka, right? Because that's the results of our collaboration, and the results of our collaboration might not have a graph or anything physical that I can point to. It feels less like a concrete noun and more like, just the aftermath of our collaboration. So that's why I'm making kind of a big point about how I translated this. I don't translate kyodo no kekka as a firm noun phrase, right? I kind of translate it as the results of our collaboration. I don't know. I find these things really interesting, and I hope you do too. As a translator, these are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about all the time. So I don't know. I wanted to talk about it a little bit. Anyway, I hope that you've learned a lot as a result of today's lesson. I look forward to seeing you again. See you next week. Mata ne!